Welcome to the HVAC Business Growth Podcast. Is your business getting beaten by the competition or your profits dwindling? It's time to kickstart your HVAC business. Here's your host, Nick Balowski.
Hello everybody and welcome to the HVAC Business Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Balowski. We've got a big show planned ahead today, so let's get stuck into it. This week, what we're going to do is talk about direct marketing for your HVAC website. Last week, we spoke about Direct Marketing 101. We went through a few of the basic philosophies and the fundamentals. Now what we want to do is actually apply these basic philosophies that we discussed last week to your website. So we're not going to worry about off-page marketing or anything like that. It's really about getting the direct marketing elements on your website. So let's get stuck into it. So I want to start by firstly saying a lot of the things that I'm going to mention, consider these rules for your website. If you don't have them, the only reason why you shouldn't have some of these elements is if you've actually tested. So you've used testing software and you actually understand that something isn't for your website. So we'll start off by talking about sales pages. And what we need to do is pretty much go from the top of the page down. So one of my direct marketing rules for a business website is that all sales pages need to have a clear headline or a unique selling proposition. Again, unless you've tested otherwise. So a clear headline, top of the page, you should have a headline that actually outlines your unique selling position or your unique selling statement to the market and the number one or the overriding benefit that the customer will get from choosing your service business. So a clear headline is super important. Think of it like a page hierarchy. So if somebody lands on your page, almost like a newspaper, you want them to see the headline first, and the headline's going to draw their attention in and actually direct them what to do on the rest of the page. So you really need a strong attention-grabbing headline that actually hits on what's in it for me in terms of the question that the prospect is asking when they visit your website. Right now, we're actually in a bit of an attention age. So what I mean by that is people have really short attention span. It's getting shorter and shorter. So people come to your website, they've really made up their mind, probably in less than 5 seconds, what they're going to do. So you really have to use a headline or something similar to grab their attention when they get onto your webpage so they can actually stick around. So following on from that, one thing that you need to also have on your website is one consistent call to action. So if you're actually after a phone call or after an email address or whatever it is, whatever the call to action is, ideally you've only got one. You might be able to get away with two, but it has to be really clear what you want the person to do when they come to your webpage. And it has to be strong as well. You have to really tell them what to do. So call this number now, or fill in this email address to receive, fill in this web form to receive. So just make it really clear. So one concept that we're going to be talking about a lot in this podcast is above the fold. So above the fold really came from the newspaper days. When newspapers were on the newspaper stands, they're actually folded in half, and you would always have the headline and the main points about a particular article facing upwards. So the newspaper was actually folded over. So this above the fold term, we've used it in internet terminology. So what it actually means is when somebody comes to your website, above the fold is everything that they can see on their screen without having to scroll down any further. So it's really important that you get some of these elements in there above the fold. So just on that, testimonials and proof elements are really important to have on your website. So testimonials can come from the form of maybe some customer endorsements from some good dealings that they've had with your business. I'm sure if you're doing business in an ethical way, you can go back. You may have received these unsolicited from people, but you can actually put these in your marketing from now on. Collect testimonials from people. You know, if they've had a good experience with your particular company, then you need to find out what the experience was that they actually had. So the best time to ask for testimonials is actually straight after the sale has been transacted or shortly after. People are going to be really happy with the new heating and cooling system that's been put in, or the service that they got to get an existing unit up and running again. They're going to be really happy post-purchase, hopefully if you've done a good job, that is. And that's the best time to actually ask for a testimonial. It's not too late. If it happened 6 months ago or 12 months ago, you can go back, but just be aware that you're probably going to get better results straight after the service or the product has actually been used. From a proof element perspective, you're starting to see this a lot more now. So instead of people using testimonials on the websites, you're actually starting to see things like as seen in, and they have a list of magazines or newspapers or publications or radio stations that they've been endorsed by. So if you've been featured in the New York Times or a particular HVAC magazine or something like that, then you can actually use the logo, or you can just write down the name of the business if you want, but I think using the logo actually works quite well. So you could put the logo of the New York Times or the local newspaper of your particular city, or the magazine publication. If you've been interviewed by somebody, you might credit that interview on the front page of your website, again above the fold. So that actually helps with the proof elements on your website. So people are going to get there and they're going to feel that you're a trusted source or a trusted business. Another great way is actually to put trust seals on your website. If you're actually asking for payments up front or anything like that, then you can actually put trust seals saying that you're approved by Visa or MasterCard or anything like that. Or it might be the local Chamber of Commerce. You might be able to get a trust seal from them. All of these things, these testimonials, these proof elements, these trust seals are really important to have on your website. Again, I mentioned it earlier, you might have 5 seconds when somebody actually lands on your site. They're going to make up their mind in 5 seconds, so you better have some testimonials, some proof elements, trust seals on there, just so they feel that you're actually trustworthy and they can move forward from there. On this podcast, we don't really talk about branding a lot, but here is where branding really helps the direct marketing side of things. And this is really only a shift that's happened in the last few years, I feel, on the internet. And the shift is to having really good graphics on your website. So you still see it now, but it was really, really prominent a few years ago where people just had really basic, sloppy web pages up there, and people would land on them, and it was just basically like a Word document, but it was on the internet, so it didn't look all that good. Now, as a way to build trust and a way to make people seem that you are a real reputable business, having good graphics, having good branding on your website is really important. So we don't need the branding to take over. We just want really clean, sharp, and professional designs. So if you're getting around with a web page design or a site design that's, any more than maybe 3 years old, you want to have a really good look at it and make sure that the graphics and the level of professionalism is actually up to the standard that's required in the marketplace now. People unfortunately do judge a book by its cover, so they land on your website, and if it's a bit of a stinker, it's a bit of an old one, they're just going to hit the back button and go and search for something else. It's pretty unfortunate, but that's the way it is now. So the next item that I wanted to talk about is a little bit of a psychological one for the prospect, and it's a topic of phone numbers. So most business owners think that having a 1300 or a 1800 or some sort of toll-free or free call number is actually really good for business. And sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Again, it's something that you have to test. But from a psychological perspective for the prospect, whenever they see a 1300 or a 1800 number, they probably feel that when they ring, they're actually not going to speak to somebody with any authority. They're going to speak to somebody on a switchboard or an assistant, and they're either going to get a really hard sales type of phone call, they're going to get asked and bombarded with a million questions, and they're probably going to feel a little bit uncomfortable doing that. So one thing that I'd like you to consider is actually putting your local phone number on the website. So don't worry about the 1300 numbers or the 1800 numbers, just the local phone number. So again, that probably adds to the trust that you're going to get when people come to your website. People are going to look at it and actually feel that when they ring up, they're going to get to speak to a real person or somebody that's at least really close to the business owner or not too far removed in terms of somebody that can make a bit of a decision. So I know this piece of advice is probably counterintuitive to a lot of you, but again, it's something that I think is really worth considering testing, and actually just put yourself in the shoes of your prospect for just a second and have a think about what they're feeling when they're actually visiting your site. Do they feel that if they see that 1300 or the 1800 number, if they call it, are they going to get bombarded? Are they going to be able to speak to somebody with any level of authority? It's pretty important when people are visiting the website. So if we just double back for a second and actually start talking again about call to actions, I think it's actually really important that the response that you want people to make, I want you to make it really clear. So a great trend that I'm seeing on websites more and more now is actually giving people the instructions for what to do. Give them the next step. So we're seeing a lot of websites now that have step 1, do this. Step 2, do that. Step 3, now this will happen. So I think having a 3-step approach for people, or might only be a 2-step approach, I think it's really important that you spell it out for them, make it really, really clear what you want them to do, and actually hold their hand through the whole process. I think it's really, really important that you do that. Now we're going to get stuck into some things about the offer. Now on your page, particularly your homepage or a sales page, it's really important that you have an offer all the time. Remember, if we're branding, we're just basically putting our logo out there, putting our name out there, and hoping that maybe sometime in the near future somebody might come back. If you're like me, I think that's a pretty weak way to actually approach business. You actually want people to do something. You want to give them an offer. You want them to get hungry and get them really, really motivated to do business with you. So every page, or every sales page I should say, needs to have an offer of some kind. So I don't mean actually beating down the price, because we spoke about it last week. Playing the price game is probably one of the worst things that you can do. But maybe even look to package or bundle the services or the products that you're actually doing. And again, make it really, really hard. We spoke about this last week. Make it hard for people to compare apples to apples. We want apples to oranges, or apples with any other fruit, which is what I mentioned last week. Put an offer on your website. Make it really hard for people to compare. If you have a particular system that's been done by a certain manufacturer, you don't want people to look at that and start price shopping you at all. You want to be able to bundle in different service elements or different guarantees or just something. Make an offer. Make it an outstanding offer. Another way to get people to actually take action is to have some sort of deadline. So when people see your offer, they know that by this Friday or the end of the month or whatever it is, this offer expires. So you can actually be consistently changing things up on your website. You might have maybe not a deal of the day, a deal of the week, or a deal of the month, or something like that. Just make deals and make offers to people and let them know that to capitalize on a particular offer, they have to do it by a certain date. If you don't give people any sort of deadline, then they'll just basically go on their own programming and they'll buy whenever they're ready. Ethically, you can get people to buy a little bit more when you're ready by putting a good offer together and saying that they need to do something by a certain date. It's a great way just to tip people over the edge, to get them off the fence that they're sitting on. So what we want to do now is really discuss some of the realities about marketing, direct marketing, and conversions on your particular website. So unfortunately, conversions for a standard website, they might only be 1%. So again, I'll spell it out for you. If you get 100 people visiting the website, only one of them is going to take the action that you want. That's for a 1% conversion rate, that is. So it's really important that we find ways to either recycle the traffic or build some sort of follow-up sequence. It's been bandied around, but some people might take up to or more than 7 times to actually decide to transact business with you. So they might come across your website 7 times, or they might receive 7 pieces of mail or 7 emails or 7 phone calls, or a combination of all of the above, before they actually decide to do business with you. So you could have the best campaign out there in the world. You could have the best radio ad running with a fantastic offer. People come to your website, or they might call up and they're not quite ready to do business. You can't just let them go. You have to obviously take some of their details or have a way of contacting them and following up. You can leave it to the sales team to do that, and then be systematic and ruthless without being disrespectful to your particular prospect, and just keep following up until it's no longer profitable to do that. So you can actually measure how much follow-up you should be doing in terms of how much it costs for you to acquire a customer. So if a customer is actually worth to you, say they're worth $2,000 lifetime value by the time you add up the profit from all the products and services that they consume over X amount of time, over a lifetime period, how much are you actually willing to spend on advertising and marketing and follow up to actually secure that person? I'm sure it's going to be worth more than just the $1 that an ad might be worth per person to see it. It might be more like $100, it might be $500. So you can see there's a lot of time, there's a lot of phone calls and mail pieces and catalogs and those sorts of things that can actually be sent out to the person to fit within that budget to acquire a new customer. So some things that we want to have on our website to make follow-up possible, we can actually have some sort of opt-in forms. So instead of actually asking for a particular action straight away, so instead of asking for somebody to buy something, you might ask them to join some sort of membership or some sort of list, something where you get their name and contact details and you might give them something in return. It might be a small gift, it might be some sort of consumer awareness guide, just a way that you can get their details and then follow up from there. So you might want to follow up via email or direct mail. That's totally up to you and whatever works best for your particular business. But you need to set up some sort of systematic follow-up. So again, a couple of ways you can do this. Have some sort of sign-up form or a web form on your particular web page. You might put it in the middle, you might put it in the right-hand sidebar, you might put it in the left-hand sidebar. Just something that you can test. If you're really aggressively wanting to go for the sale straight up, you might have some sort of pop-up. So what a pop-up basically is, somebody will come to your website, you might be asking for them to buy a particular unit just up front. But you can see, you can put a code on your website where it looks like they're going for maybe the cross or the back button, or they're motioning to move away from your site, or they might actually be staying on your site for a long period of time. You might then code a pop-up to come on. So a pop-up might basically blacken out the whole screen, and then a small box comes up on the screen with some sort of offer on there. So you might offer some sort of free gift or a free service, and in return you get their name and email address. You might actually have, instead of a pop-up, if they go or motion to go to another site or click the back button or the cross button, it might redirect to a particular page or offer on your website. So again, we're trying to get the maximum amount out of every person that comes to the site. So if they don't buy straight away, ideally we try and get contact details of some kind. Another great way of doing this, and it's a little bit more soft, I guess you could say, is actually to use social media. So it's not the primary driver or the primary thing on your site, but if you have Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or YouTube or something like that, actually urge people to follow you or like you through those particular mediums. So if it's Facebook, for example, you might have a little Facebook widget on the side of the page. If they hit the like button, now you can start to contact them indirectly. I'm not talking about direct messaging here, but just putting little posts and ads up on Facebook where you're marketing to them indirectly in a way. You're not going 100% at them, you don't have their address or anything like that, but you're still able to contact with them. And that way you can actually recycle the traffic. So what that means is they come to the website once. If you get them to like you on Facebook or follow you on Twitter, any other special offers that you've got, you can actually get them to see by posting these offers on Facebook or Twitter, and hopefully they see that from there. Another great thing that it's almost a whole episode in itself, and we'll talk about it, I think, in another episode. We might even get a special guest to talk about it, is remarketing. So again, this is a pretty stealth thing to do, but setting it up in Google AdWords with the content network, you can actually put a remarketing code on your site. So when people visit your website, they're actually cookied for a certain period. It might be 30 days or it might be 90 days. Just depends maybe on how specific you want to be. You might have an offer that only expires in 2 weeks, so you might put the code on their computer for maybe 2 weeks. Anyway, so the premise of it, or how it works, is basically they visit your site, they're cookied, so they have a little code, and then when they go around the internet in their spare time and just visit some other sites, you've actually created some banners that actually get positioned on these other websites. So these aren't your websites. They get positioned on other websites with an ad, and if they click the ad, then they get returned back to your site. So again, it's a way to build a little bit of a mailing list or an email list almost. So it's a way to build a stealth list that they don't actually know that they're on, but you can contact them in a little bit of a sneaky way just by putting some really targeted banners up that's relative to the offer that you've made a little bit earlier. So that's a great way of following up and also recycling the traffic. So I guess one of the biggest lessons from this particular podcast that we've done is to test, and test. You want to get really, really good at testing in your business. So for your website, you can actually use a tool that's called Visual Website Optimizer. It's really easy to use. It works on a WYSIWYG. So how Visual Website Optimizer works is basically you can create another web page that is almost an identical clone of one that you're wanting to test, but you might put some particular element on there. So if we go back and recover the discussion that we had about phone numbers, you might test two different phone numbers. You might test the 1-800 number versus the local business phone number. So everything on the page is exactly the same except for those two phone numbers, and you can run a test against each other. You could also test a headline on the page versus no headline but with a video, and just see which one is the winning page from a conversion perspective. Again, testing is really, really important, and it's really cheap to do. You can set up Visual Website Optimizer for a couple of $100 and start running tests on it. If you're driving really good amounts of traffic to your business, so you might be driving a couple of hundred visitors a day, maybe more, depends on the size of your business and what you're offering, you can do some tests really, really quickly. And the good thing with testing, just say you might test 3 different elements on a page. Quite often, you never really take a massive step back, but quite often one element will actually be far and away better than another. I've seen it time and time again. One thing that's probably worth testing, and it's not the same for every site, that's a bit of a disclaimer, is that video seems to be working really well. I'm talking double-digit improvements in conversions from having video on a website, so that's something that you really need to test. Okay, now it's time for the HVAC Business Growth Tip of the Week. So the tip of the week this week is to actually test one thing that you've learned from this podcast. So I'm just going to do a really quick dot point recap of what we actually covered today. So we talked about having a clear headline or USP. We also talked about call to actions, having one consistent, if possible, call to action above the fold. We talked about testimonials and proof elements. We talked about phone numbers. We talked about asking for a clear response and actually laying it out for them in a step 1, 2, and 3 type of format. We talked about having and creating offers and always having offers on your pages. We talked about deadlines. We talked about ways to follow up using pop-ups and redirects and ways of recycling traffic. And we talked about the Google Content Network and remarketing. We talked about having good graphics on your website, and we talked about testing and using the Visual Website Optimizer. So again, the tip is pick one thing from this podcast and actually try and implement it this week. So why should you do this? Well, here's some food for thought. If you can increase your conversions from 1 to 2%, wow, doesn't sound like much, does it? 1 to 2%? Well, the news is that you've actually just doubled your conversion rate going from 1 to 2%. So this might be the difference between breaking even and making a substantial profit. So I think it's really important that you implement at least one of these things and actually see if you can double your conversions. Even a 50% improvement in conversions, that could be quite a substantial chunk of profit to your business. So I think it's really important, again, that you hone in on one particular thing and actually try and get it implemented this week. If you can double your conversions or you can get a 10% increase in conversions, I think that's going to be fantastic for your business. Again, if you're successful with it, let us know by either email or by Facebook or Twitter. Come to the website and just let us know. I'd love to hear any results that you get from implementing anything from this podcast. So that's all we've got time for today on the HVAC Business Growth Podcast. I hope to see you next week. Bye for now.
This has been another edition of the HVAC Business Growth Podcast. For more marketing tips and strategies, go to the website hvacbusinessgrowth.com.